Drucker did what a social ecologist is supposed to do. Watch out. It's coming. Look for it. Begin to operate. Begin to change in order to maintain continuity. Do it slowly. We didn't take his advice. So Drucker in 1989 wrote this book, The New Realities. It was published in 1989, but Drucker had given a series of lectures on those chapters at Claremont. Chapter 4 is called When the Russian Empire is Gone. What he predicted based upon his knowledge of history, was that perestroika would not work. That you cannot hold, Stalin held it together by force, you cannot hold it together by economic interests. There's no example in history of holding together different ethnic groups and so on over 11 time zones by economic interests alone. Henry Kissinger, our Secretary of State, read that and said, Drucker's nuts. Well, in 1991, perestroika collapsed. All these nations became independent. And I remember Peter, that night that all happened, Poland, they're just like, it happened in a matter of weeks. Coming up the stairs to Dean's house, we were at a party, and I didn't even know about Chapter 4 in the New Realities. And I said, what do you think of all this, Peter? And he had a big smile on his face because he had predicted it. He said, I knew it was going to happen, I just didn't know it was going to happen this fast. That's the social ecologist knows the direction, not necessarily the timing, right? The precise timing. And I'll tell you, you can go through his works, and time again, he's seeing things in the little nut that are going to become big boulders. And the reason he got into that is because the social ecologist attempts to persuade decision makers to prepare themselves and their people for change and to take action to create change from new opportunities. Change is not bad if you embrace it and try to become a change leader. The most effective way to manage change successfully is to create it. I can't tell you how many times I have seen this sentence quoted. The most effective way to manage change is not to become a victim of it, not to react to it, but to get out in front of it. Because the idea is to maintain, is to maintain what Drucker would call dynamic equilibrium. Okay? That is, you constantly change to maintain stability. In other words, in the presence of creative destruction and new innovation, the only way to maintain stability is to change. You see? So we have this management has to maintain equilibrium between change and continuity. This is from the Daily Drucker page, August 31st. My publisher in Japan, Diamond, recently published selected essays of mine written over the last 50 years under the title, The Future which Already Happened. For this book, I wrote kind of an intellectual autobiography, which constitutes the last chapter of the book. That is what he calls the reflection of a social ecology. In it, I record the beginning of my work more than 60 years ago, which was concerned with the balance between change and continuity. It was this concern that 10 years later led me to the study of management. Because we had the evolution of this new organization, this new institution, the organization, the corporation. For I see in management the specific organ of society that has to maintain this dynamic equilibrium between change and continuity, without which societies, organizations, and individuals perish. It's like change or die, but manage it so that you have continuity with the past. Okay? And I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think a reading of all of his works is shocking to the extent to which he has done this. And someday I'd like to record all of the predictions, all of the trends he saw coming, and some that he missed. I mean, some that he falsely, prescribed. But he never saw himself as a diviner, as a futurist, as a Gene Dixon in the United States. These fortune tellers. I think the world's going to end, or in 2020, or next week, on Tuesday at 11 o'clock. Nothing like that. It was always based upon a hard look at reality. A hard look, a very rigorous look at reality. And that's what Jim Collins talked about in May in Claremont. You were there. Because he saw this too. So I would put this as a major contribution of Drucker, right alongside of the practice of management and innovation and entrepreneurship. And of course his work in the social sector, which was more professional, helping to professionalize the management. That was more practice oriented. Maintaining dynamic equilibrium. By the way, that put him in the camp of the Austrian economists, especially Schumpeter, who he considered to be the greatest economist of the 20th century. And not Keynes, who we had the opportunity to study under, who was more interested in equilibrium, maintaining equilibrium, rather than dealing with constant disequilibrium, which is what the Austrian school and Schumpeter did. So an organization stays ahead of change by creating its own direction, anticipating trends, and quite certain future changes. It creates the future rather than being victimized by it. And we as knowledge workers have to do the same thing. We have to think about our assets and what change, how it will influence it. This process will help minimize disruption to society. It's organized. It'll help maintain continuity while pursuing the need for change. You see, I said, Peter, isn't continuity the opposite of change? And he yelled out, no! They're different poles of the same thing. And whoop! And that got on the air. So it is on that driving change module. Okay. So it's critical in trying to understand the work of Peter Drucker, to understand Drucker's methodology and to train executives how to apply the methodology to challenges they face and those that they soon will face in this flat world. To use, that's the title of Thomas Friedman's best-selling book. Training students and executives in social ecology will involve the liberal arts, primarily history, technology, economics, political science, psychology, and sociology. Executives, therefore, should be encouraged to read broadly and know something about it deeply. So, I think you see I hope you see that connection. I'm going backwards, aren't I? Okay, man. You did that. Okay. So what does the social ecologist do? Slide 21. First, the social ecologist attempts to identify important trends in society very early. Second, the social ecologist thinks through the impact of these trends on institutions and people. Third, the social ecologist provides help to executives so they can manage the tension in society between the need for rapid change and the continuity with the past. Okay. Now, I think this is a major area of contribution that Drucker made, and one that very few people think about, and one that we, as best as we can, should try to come up to speed on. Now, if you want to see an example, and why his son said to me, no, I don't think you should develop this integrity and character thing. I think what you should do is to continue the work that my father was very interested in, and that is knowledge work. And knowledge work productivity. The major phenomenon that Drucker identified and worked on throughout his career was the emergence in developed countries of knowledge work, the knowledge worker, and the knowledge society. In the United States, what he saw after World War II was that the GI Bill of Rights, the Serviceman's Readjustment, entitled all returning servicemen to a paid education. He projected this in the future, and he was correct again. The country was going to produce a cohort of very educated people that were going to apply knowledge to work and increase the productivity of work and movement out of agriculture, movement out of manufacturing, movement into service and higher technology areas. So he started to say, okay, get ready for it. My first record, and it's probably earlier, was in 1957. He died in 2005. That's a decade, half a century. He worked on this problem, on this trend for a half a century. In the post-capitalist society, that's what the whole book is about. Post-capital. Next, post-capital means knowledge. Not physical capital, human capital. Okay? Is the coin of the realm. He was convinced that the emergence of knowledge work meant that the raising the productivity of knowledge workers would be the major source of competitive advantage for people, organizations, and nations. Now, do you see why this man, this Nobel laureate, who was so interested in revitalizing and reforming education,